In the last video, we learned how user interactions within scenes require different logic than before. This video will show how new logic is used for better efficiency and user experience while changing scenes. We've gotten away so far with just having the user click anywhere at all in order to change the scenes, but we've realized that there's a drawback to that approach. We can't use clicks within scenes for any other sort of additional interaction. The way that many games and apps solve that is by adding specific user interaction or UI elements, like menus and buttons, which only change scenes upon interaction with a specific UI element. Let's add a button in the top right to control the scenes in our Storybook program. What's a button? It's two things really. One, the visual indicator that an area is clickable, and two, the logic that makes that area respond to clicks. Let's start with that visual indicator and fill a rect with a dark green color. Right about there. It'll be in the upper right, so 340, 10, about 50 wide and 25 tall. And we'll need some white text in there so that we can tell the user what it means, what it does. The text will say next, and that will be at 344.29 to position it correctly. However, that text size is too large, so we need to make sure it stays at a certain size. Whoops, at about 16. There we go. Now let's just wrap this inside of a function called drawButton. That way we can call it whenever we want. Indent, and we're good. Now, where should we call this button? We definitely need to call it when we draw the first scene, so users have a way of getting to the next scene. So I'll draw it right here. Good, now it shows up on the first scene. Let's see what happens after that. Oh well, it disappeared. Why did that happen? Well, when we click, it draws scene 2, scene 3, 4, 5, and back to 1, and therefore it covers up the button. So we would need to show it in every subsequent scene, and we need to then put it right here at the end of this mouse clicked function to make sure that it's called every time we click. Now, let's see how this works. I noticed something. The button doesn't show up in this animated scene. Why would that be? Well, let's look. Draw scene 4, this animated scene, is inside the draw function, which means it's drawn repeatedly. And since our button isn't in the draw function, it's not drawn repeatedly and it gets covered up. We then, of course, need to draw it after draw scene 4 to make sure that we see it. So I'll call drawButton, and it is now drawn repeatedly over draw scene 4. And it's going to be there the whole time. That's good. And just in case some enterprising individual tries to draw babies over this next button, we should call this button right here at the end of the mouse dragged. drawButton. And now no one can cover up that button with babies, or baby Winstons. Okay, great, we have a button in every scene. But, you know what's hilarious? The button does nothing. I mean, the user might think it does something if they decide to click only that area, but in fact, they could click anywhere. It'll do the same thing, see? We need to change our mouse click logic so that we check the mouse location before we decide it's time to change the scene. Like we did in the button challenges in Intro to JS, we need to come up with an if condition to check mouse X and mouse Y. Usually that means using or combining 4 conditions with the AND operator, and I'll use some pseudocode to make sense of it. If the mouse X is greater than the left side, and the mouse X is less than the right side, and mouse Y is less than the bottom, and mouse Y is greater than the top. Then of course we put this inside. However, since the button is in the top right, we can take a shortcut and not use 2 of these. We can just use is the mouse X greater than the left, and is the mouse Y less than the bottom. and I will then replace or remove the rest, uncomment it, and close up this, indent, and of course we have to replace left with 340 since that's the left side of the button, and the bottom is 40. And I removed mouse Y here. I need to replace that. Now let's make sure that works. It does. And clicking elsewhere does not work. So we finally got our button to work. With that logic, we now have a program where the user clicks a particular area of the screen to move to the next scene. And that's great. Now that we have a way of knowing when a click is meant for changing scenes, we can use clicks for other interactions in our scenes now, as long as they're not clicking on the button. That means we can let the user add the Winston babies on click instead of drag, like we originally wanted. We'll just add an else to this if statement here, and move the code from mouse dragged into the else. Right there. And indent. Okay, now I can remove mouse dragged since we don't need to do that now. Everything should work. And we can now click to add babies. Baby Winstons. Note that we have to keep that if condition here to check the current scene, to make sure it only happens for this scene. But now it's easy for us to add click interaction on any other scene too. What else could you let the user add? Facial hair? Other avatar friends? Play around with the program. See you in the next video.